welcome to the latest episode of the Movie Crusaders. My name's Sean Wasserkrug, and we've got another review roundup as I watched 5 movies this weekend. 4 actually came out this weekend, and then the 5th one was an Oscar favorite that came out a couple months back that I finally got around to watching. Movies that we're going to be reviewing today is Windfall on Netflix, X in theaters, Deep Water on Hulu, not in Hulu, Cheaper by the Dozen 2022 on Disney Plus, and Coda on Apple TV. I guess we'll get started with Windfall first. Windfall, the general consensus of Windfall is a man breaks into a tech billionaire's empty vacation home, but things go sideways when the arrogant Mongol and his wife arrive for a last-minute getaway. This movie, a lot like how you would kind of do a play. You basically kind of have these 4 characters, three main ones, and then a 4th one comes around about halfway through the film. They're not given names, but you got Jason Segel, who is nobody. That's his actual name on the credits. You've got Jesse Plemons, who is the CEO, Lily Collins, who's the wife, and then you also have Omar Leva, who is the gardener, who comes about halfway through the film. And they basically stage this movie a lot like if you were doing this on a play. I mean, it all takes place around this really nice house, also outside shots as well. And the first 5 to 7 minutes of the movie is literally Jason Segel's nobody, walking around this house and just kind of doing certain things here and there, and he's stealing the money. And when he's about ready to leave, in comes the CEO and the wife. He tries to escape without basically being noticed, but, the wife sees him, and thus we have pretty much almost like a 24-hour time with these characters, and them waiting for certain things to come up and happen, so that way they can all kind of move on with their lives. I love all 3 of these lead actors. I love Jason Segel. I was saying this to Brian, my co-host, is that I miss Jason Segel, and I don't necessarily miss him in roles like these, and I don't mean that because he's bad in this. Jason Segel is great in these kind of dramatic kind of roles, but I miss Jason Segel in the comedies, like How I Met Your Mother, where he played Marshall, or Forgetting Sarah Marshall, or even the Muppet movie. I love Jason Segel's comedy. He was great last year in Our Friend. But in these movies, when you don't have his comedy talents or comedic talents, it really just kind of feels a lot to be desired. He's a fantastic dramatic actor, and with this movie, it really kind of rides on his shoulders to kind of push the story through. Lily Collins is basically playing more the victim of this, trying to keep both guys at bay from going overboard, and basically trying to be the moral compass or the voice of reason through both these characters. And Jesse Plemons as CEO, I love Jesse Plemons, and he does a great job in this film, basically being a kind of a prick, because he's that rich guy who thinks he can kind of settle everything. He thinks he's the smartest man in the room, and can kind of really talk down to you to make you feel like you're a nobody. The main crux, or the main problem, I guess, that goes with Windfall is it's an hour and 30 minutes, so it's a rather quick film, but it doesn't feel like a quick film because the way the film is run is a lot like a play. It's a lot of just standing around or sitting there in quiet, just kind of almost studying each other until some of them start going into a monologue and have little bits of back and forth banter here and there, and then we go to the next scene of them just kind of standing around for the next few minutes until they start going at it again. And you're expecting or you're waiting for more of the story to open up, to develop, to find out more reasons why the nobody is doing this, or if there really is a connective tissue between the nobody and the CEO. And while you do get some of that answered, the answers are not strong enough to really carry this movie over. I think Jesse Segel, Jesse Plemons, and Lily Collins, and even Omar Leva, to an extent, I think they all do a great job in terms of performing these characters and making these characters feel very real and lived in for the situation that we're at. But as the movie goes on, you start to just kind of feel, I don't want to say antsy, but you start to feel like there's got to be more to this. There's got to be a big twist coming. There's got to be something that's going to cause this movie to bump up to the next level. And while you do get that at the very, very end, at that point, it's too late. It's already over, and you just kind of are sitting there and wondering where this movie's going to go next. And that's kind of where the problem with Windfall lies, is that it's an hour and a half, but it feels more like three actors in Collins, Siegel, and Clemens who are really just testing stuff out and doing kind of almost like um, a monologue session with these characters, but the story just doesn't feel strong enough to be released in theaters. On a play, I think this would work perfectly. In a movie on Netflix, it just kind of feels like it's missing something there. It's like it comes along like the lines of a movie that I actually do really love, which was SLEUTH, which starred Jude Law and Michael Caine, which was very play-like. I think it was directed by Kenneth Branagh in 2007, which is a fantastic film where you have these two characters in this building, and you're developing these characters. They're growing as the film goes on. Whereas in this movie, I feel like they just never got past the first gear. If you want to watch these three actors put on really solid performances, then I would strongly recommend Windfall. But if you're looking for a little something more out of this film, you're just not going to get it with this one overall. So for me, I'm going to give Windfall a 62%. If you're a fan of these actors and actresses, then check it out, but don't expect to be blown away by the story. Cinematography-wise, and even the soundtrack is very beautiful, but the story itself is just lacking all the way up till the end credits. Going to our next film is going to be X. Now, this is the latest horror film from A24, starring Mia Goth, Martin Henderson, Jenna Ortega in her third horror film of the year, Brittany Snow, Kid Cudi, and Owen Campbell, as well as Stephen Uri, probably saying that wrong. But the general plot for X is movies based in 1979, and a group of young filmmakers set out to make an adult film in rural Texas, but when their reclusive elderly hosts catch them in the act, the cast find themselves fighting for their lives. This was one of those movies where, I mean, I love horror films, but when I saw the trailer for this, it frankly really didn't do much for me. It didn't really make me want to go, I have to go see this in theaters right now. It was one of those that I was honestly going to wait to watch this until it came out on digital, Blu-ray, DVD, whatever you want to call it nowadays. But I had heard some really, really good word of mouth. Now, it is an A24 film, and A24 films tend to always have really good word of mouth. And then depending on the person, it's either really good, like it's supposed to be, or it's kind of an overrated, pretentious love fest for A24. So I went in with relative low expectations going into this, and I will say that X is definitely one of these movies that kind of reminds me of those 70s, 80s kind of horror films. It feels very grindhousey. It feels dirty and very pixelated in a sense, like very 1970s. So in terms of visualizations of how they shot this film from the director and the cinematographer, I think they do a fantastic job with that. And one thing that I think it does really well that I wasn't really expecting, and I guess A24 does do this very well, and it kind of reminded me of the old works of Wes Craven in a way, especially like The Hills Have Eyes, is that while the horror slasher-esque moments are there, it's more of the uncomfortable, just feels wrong watching this, or why the hell am I watching this kind of horror that X is really given to you, that they excel at. There's many moments where you're watching this film and you're just kind of looking around like, what the fuck am I watching? Or, oh my god, are we really going to show this? Oh, we are going to show this. I don't want to watch this. And you can take that and hate a movie like this, or you can embrace this horror film is really trapping you in your seat and forcing you to watch some of these scenes, and it is not giving you an escape. And some of those work in terms of like a Saw film, but then they went too far with that with torture porn. This is not that kind of route. A lot of this hard to watch stuff is more on the sexual side than it is more of the horror side. This is definitely a movie. I know I've seen a lot of parents bring their kids into horror movies like Scream and stuff like that. This is definitely not a horror movie to bring kids through. There's a ton of sex in the film, and it's not like softcore porn like Skinamax where it's like, oh yeah, there's boobs and that's it. But no, this is actual legit like sex scenes. I'm not saying you see crotch areas or anything, but you definitely really get the sex aspect of this film, especially in two of the scenes. And then in terms of the gore, this is a very, very, very gory film, which was kind of a welcoming surprise. There's a lot of kind of almost cover your eyes, I might get nauseous in terms of horror scenes in this film, which was definitely a welcome surprise. In terms of the cast, you got Mia Goth, who plays Maxine, who's kind of the main character of this. Her performance, it to me gets better as the movie goes on, and there's some other aspects of her performance as well that definitely elevates it to a way better than expected performance from Mia Goth. I didn't really know who Mia Goth was prior to this film. She was the one character that I was like, I don't know if she's the main or if she's just the one we're focusing on to start the film. But as we get to the end of the film, I think Mia Goth does a solid performance. I don't think it's like a blow your mind, like welcome to, the movie's Mia Goth performance. But I do think that she was a solid horror girl that the film likes to focus on through this film. Jenny Ortega, like I said, this is her third horror film, fourth movie that's come out this year. I did not see Studio 666, but I did see her in Scream and The Fallout. Jenny Ortega, this is probably, I wouldn't say her worst performance of the four films, but it's the one that gives her the least amount to do. She basically plays the soundtrack girl, the one that carries the boom mic throughout the film. And her character also kind of elevates as the film goes on. A lot of these characters actually do a very good job of elevating their characters to the point when we get to certain moments, whether they live or die, that you actually kind of, I don't necessarily say that you care about them living or dying, but their deaths definitely do hit a little harder for them. Jenna Ortega's character, she's kind of the prudish girl who didn't know she was shooting a porno until right before it happens, but then starts to kind of embrace it as it goes on. Brittany Snow plays Bobby Lynn. She's basically the straight up stripper who wants to be a porn star, so she's eating up the screen time that she's on. I think Brittany Snow's honestly one of the more enjoyable parts of this film, along with Kid Cudi as Jackson. He was honestly my favorite part of the film. I thought Kid Cudi does a great job as Jackson. I think as I was watching the film, I was more and more just kind of impressed with his performance of the film. And if there was one thing coming out of this, that was the one thing that I could take, is that, wow, Kid Cudi could be a pretty good actor, given the right kind of script. And I think he does a great job in this as well. Martin Henderson plays Wayne. He's kind of the guy who's run the whole thing. And I actually enjoy Martin Henderson, but he's just doing his best Matthew McConaughey impression. There was quite a few times in this film where I was just like, okay, you're just being McConaughey. Like, if you're going to be McConaughey, just go full McConaughey. Like, go ahead and go with, all right. Don't teeter this line of like, is he doing McConaughey or is he just really doing a bad impression of him? It's kind of funny, but it also is just kind of aggravating at the same time because he's just so right on the cusp of going full McConaughey, and he never really does. And Owen Campbell's RJ, I think he does a solid job kind of playing this like hippie who's really into film and thinks that he can make porn into some revolutionary studio thing, which evidently it does go that route in real life, but all they really have to go off of is Debbie Does Dallas. In terms of the actual horror, it is kind of a little ridiculous to where we go from each stage of the film. But the gore, like I said, it works very well. Some of the deaths, I think they were a little too quick. I kind of think that some of the characters definitely get a lot more brutal deaths than others. Some a little more comedic deaths than others. There's a few times where you actually do laugh at some of the deaths, which it's a horror film. You're allowed to have laughs in these kinds of movies. And I think overall by the end of the film, they do add kind of a twist at the end. I don't think that twist necessarily hit as hard as I think they wanted it to. It was definitely an A24 twist. It doesn't make or break the film. It was just kind of more of like oh, okay, kind of a twist and a, oh my god, I can't believe it kind of thing. Overall, though, X did exceed my expectations. I went in kind of expecting to kind of just be like, it was fine, but not great, to, wow, X really grossed me out. It made me uncomfortable. The gore was incredibly gory, but in terms of a horror film, this was definitely something that made me remind myself of the 70s and 80s kind of horror films like A Hills Have Eyes from Wes Craven, where you are stuck in some of these scenes and you're just uncomfortable and you want to leave but you can't because you're stuck in a theater watching this movie. So in terms of a recommendation, if you want that old kind of flashback of a horrors from the 70s and 80s, I think X works out beautifully. I think it's got a very solid cast, great gore, some good comedy bits in it, as well as some really great gore overall. And I think definitely you guys would enjoy it for the most part, but just go in expecting what you're going to be getting with this. You're going to be uncomfortable in a lot of moments. I'm not like Midsommar type levels, but you're definitely going to have some uncomfortable moments, but that I think entices or makes the film better overall. So I'm going to give X an 81%, and I do recommend checking that out in theaters with a big base of fans in the audience. Going to the next film, we are going to be talking about Deep Water on Hulu. This is a movie that up until I think like 2-3 weeks back did not know this movie existed. And sorry to be the guy of this, the only reason why this movie is worth going to see is because, I'm sorry, you want to see Ana de Armas. She basically is playing this kind of honeypot sex symbol in this movie. She's basically, you got her and she's married to Ben Affleck, and the general plot is a well-to-do husband who allows his wife to have affairs in order to avoid a divorce becomes a prime suspect in the disappearance of her lovers. And the trailer for this basically is Ana de Armas slutting around through all this movie while you wonder what Ben Affleck's character is going to do. And Ana de Armas is breathtakingly beautiful. She's definitely an actress that over the last, I would say, 3 years, maybe 4 years, depends on when Knives Out came out, has really kind of stepped up as one of the most beautiful women in the world. She was the best part of No Time to Die last year. Like I said, she was phenomenal in Knives Out. She was great in Blade Runner 2049. She's definitely an actress that when she comes out with things, you take notice. And when you have a movie like this that's really kind of pushing the envelope of her being kind of this very, very sexual character, that's why you're watching this movie. You're not watching this for the story or anything like that. You are watching this because Ana de Armas looks like she has a lot of sex in this film, and you want to see that. I'm sorry, I'm a dude. Brian was the same way. What you get in this film is, yes, you do get a very sexualized, slutty-esque version of Ana de Armas. And then you've got Ben Affleck who plays Vic, who is this kind of supposed to be this really big tech genius. He created the chip that they use for drones, so he's very rich, and he doesn't really have much. He doesn't like have a job anymore. He's retired. But basically, they live in this kind of, I would say, like the rich side of town. I don't know how big the town actually is. But you basically have this story where them and all their friends always are hanging out, doing parties and stuff like that. And you have Ana de Armas, who plays Melinda, basically picking some random dude and flirting and basically dancing and making out with and basically kind of making Vic look like a cuck, because for the most part, he is a cuck in this movie, while all of their friends and family and all that kind of look on disapprovingly, going, hey, Vic, you should reel Melinda in. She makes you look pathetic and kind of like an idiot. And Vic just be like, oh, no, she's fine. She's just having fun. You know how she is. And then eventually Vic gets too fed up with it and then threatens the said guy that Melinda is flirting with, dry humping basically throughout the scenes, and basically threatens them, saying that, he's killed someone in his past and he might kill them. You never know whether to believe him or not, or they never know whether to believe him to not. About halfway through the film, you do kind of get this reveal of whether or not what he's saying is true or if he's blowing smoke. That's supposed to be a big twist in the film. I don't think the twist is as great as they make it out to be. I honestly was kept waiting for kind of a Gone Girl situation, which also starred Ben Affleck. But it never ever pushes that moment to a Gone Girl-esque area, the movie itself is kind of dull, and it's not as sexy as it thinks it is. Ana de Armas is sexy as hell in this film, but the problem is as well is you have to like the characters that you're watching. Ben Affleck's Vic, he basically just stands there stoically, quiet, creepy. He basically just always finds Ana de Armas as Melinda doing something she shouldn't be doing, and he just watches her through a window. There's this other subplot of the movie where he collects or has a real big thing about snails. You think that's going to go down a path at some point in the film, or it's going to lead to something. It doesn't. It's just a weird thing that the Vic character has where he really loves snails, and he has a garage full of snails. Goes nowhere. You got another character played by Tracy Letts, whose character's name is Dawn, who's like this neighbor friend who thinks Vic did kill this one man and thinks he might kill again. So he constantly basically stalks and watches Vic from afar. Tracy Letts, hands down, probably one of the worst performances I've seen of 2022 so far. There's one particular scene in the third act where I was just like laughably like, this is awful. This is downright awful performance that we're getting. Grace Jenkins, who plays Ben Affleck and Ana de Armas' daughter Trixie, also kind of a weird character. They kind of make her out to be a lot smarter than she is, and kind of being like overly clever and overly observant of her parents at like 5-6 years old. And it just is kind of off-putting. I'm not saying blaming the girl on this. She's a little girl. It's more of the direction that in the script that they give her. But it was just kind of a weird kid performance because of the movie we're watching. You're just kind of like, I don't know how to treat this kid. Is she just a weird kid, or is this kid going to come off and something's going to happen with this kid throughout the film? I'm not going to say whether or not something does happen, but they do have a weird moment in the end credits where you just kind of, the camera sticks on her in the backseat singing a song, and even then, it's just a weird, off-putting moment to stick the camera on the kid for 2-3 minutes as the credits roll, listening to her sing I Want to Feel Like Dancing, or Dance the Night Away, whatever the title's called. But the problem is that with Ana de Armas and Ben Affleck's characters, they're two very attractive actors and actresses. You got, like I said, Ana de Armas, who's gorgeous, and you got Ben Affleck, who's a decent, handsome guy by Hollywood standards. And you have this kind of sexual, erotic thriller cat and mouse game between them because she wants more passion. She's not from America, so she thinks that you shouldn't be locked down to one man, and he kind of lets her do that stuff as long as she doesn't have sex with them. She can kind of flirt and make out and do whatever she wants, but she just can't have sex. And she constantly pushes the envelope with these guys. But the thing is that in order to really enjoy this or believe a lot of this is you have to believe the relationship between these characters, like I said, as well as also like them. And there's never a moment in this film that I believe that Vic or Melinda love each other, except for more of like a possession kind of thing. Now, had they dove deeper into that, or if they dove deeper into maybe an abusive state where one of them feels trapped by the other, kind of like in a Gone Girl situation, that would make a lot of these scenes more believable. But the problem is they never go that route with it. It just kind of feels like a weird situation where why doesn't one of them just divorce the other? Unless it's just more for, like I said, a big sex game. But then it doesn't ever feel that way because these characters just have zero sexual chemistry with one another throughout this film. That you're watching this movie and it's just kind of a dull, over-the-top, way too long, even though it's only like an hour 45 minutes. No, it's actually around 2 hours. That by the time you get to the end of the film, like I said, you're waiting for this big kind of twist thing to happen. And I guess they think they did that, but by the end of the movie, it was just kind of like, this is kind of boring and just kind of sad that this movie was kind of given kind of a... I think if they wanted to push the envelope, they could have really gone harder with a lot of the aspects of this film and really maybe could have made something out of this. But the script is just not good. The performances, outside of Tracy Letts, they're not awful, but they're also just not believable through most of this film. And it's just kind of an uneasy, I don't know how to feel about what I'm watching, except for Ana de Armas basically finding a revolving door of guys. As soon as one guy disappears, she finds another guy. seconds later. There is no breathing room between these guys. So you don't know how much time has passed in between each guy. Or she literally just goes on the street and goes, hey, next guy, come here. Which, what kind of direction is that as a director going, Ana de Armas, you're basically always horny. You always want a guy at your disposal. Go. And Ben Affleck, you're stoic, you're creepy, you watch your wife from afar. Go. And that's basically the only direction they have through this film. Deepwater tries to be overly sexy like a lot of the films of the 90s where they did erotic thriller very, very well. And ultimately, it fails to do so in every aspect. I'm going to give Deepwater a 40%. Definitely not something, unless you really want to see Ana de Armas kind of be slutty sexy through most of this film, there's really no reason to watch this movie whatsoever. It's kind of a disappointment based off of these actors involved. Going to the next film, we've got Disney Plus's Cheaper by the Dozen. It is another one of those failed Disney films where they try to reboot a film that did not need rebooting to try and make it seem relevant by today's standards and today's stories. If you guys already heard it already, this movie sucks. You got Gabrielle Union and Zach Braff, who play the parents in this one. Like I said, it's remaking the early 2000s Cheaper by the Dozen with Bonnie Hunt and Steve Martin, which a lot of people enjoyed, but a lot of people did not at the same time. These characters, they're basically, there's a subplot where Paul Baker, played by Zach Braff, is this restaurant owner who really makes this phenomenal sauce, and that main plot is basically him kind of taking his sauce nationwide and maybe taking his restaurant nationwide. So they start to come into some money, and you guys have seen this subplot where he gets too busy for his family and all this, hijinks and stuff happens, and that's basically what the plot of this movie is for Zach Braff's side of things. Gabrielle Union's character, Zoe, her side of this is that she used to she used to be married to a football player played by Timon Kyle Durrett, and he got too busy for her, and he was always gone, and she basically didn't feel loved anymore. And so the Zoe character is basically feeling that way towards Zach Braff's character because he's always gone and leaving her at home with all the kids, that she starts to feel lost and kind of dreamless in this. Like I said, great Disney film story. But the kids themselves, first off, unlike the original not even the original Cheaper by the Dozen, but the Cheaper by the Dozen film in the Disney films, all these kids are not their kids. They don't have 12 kids or 10 kids or what have you, like the Cheaper by the Dozen film of previous years. This is basically, this one's got 3 kids, this one's got this many kids, then they adopted these kids, or this kid's Zach Braff's nephew is staying with them because his sister's in rehab, which was a weird subplot story that they added, but they never really dove into, just to give kind of an edge to this character. So they don't really actually have that many kids. It's just a bunch of people all staying in one house together, which was also kind of a bullshit kind of response to making it Cheaper by the Dozen when it's not really Cheaper by the Dozen. In terms of the rest of the cast in this film, none of them really are given much in order to really breed into these characters outside of like maybe 2 or 3 of the actual kids. A lot of the other ones are basically just cookie cutter, generic, like, oh, you're the youngest, you're gonna be like a TikTok star, you're this grungy pop girl, but we'll put her in a wheelchair so that way she's edgy and different. This one's gonna be a basketball star. This one's gonna be the nerdy kid. This one's going to be an Indian kid who is treated like an Indian kid unfairly. These are gonna be these kids. They're all just stereotypical plot points to elevate and push the stories. None of them are really given full-fledged character arcs to really believe in their characters' performances because, once again, it's a Disney Channel movie, basically. This is not a movie that you're going to see in movie theaters. It's a Disney Plus film. They're trying to pump it out on Disney Plus for people to watch, which, sadly, I did. And you got 2 actors in Gabrielle Union and Zach Braff who are popular. You got Zach Braff from Scrubs, and Gabrielle Union is, in my opinion, one of the more popular actresses out there in terms of certain situations, especially in the 2000s with Bring It On, Bad Boys 2. And they put him in this film, and for the first hour of this movie, it's not bad. It is what it is. You're just like, what did I expect from this film? It's not outright horrible. It's just kind of eh. But then in the last hour of this movie, they really try to go, let's get politically correct. Let's talk about today's today's climate with racial injustice and the way everyone's perceived because they have a mixed family or mixed racial family, and they really try to drive that stuff home. The problem with that is it's half-hearted. It's lazy, and honestly, it feels kind of offensive because they are just throwing it in there going, so we're Disney, we're being progressive and inclusive and all this kind of stuff, and we're hearing how the world is today, so let's throw this in the movie. And it's just kind of like, eye-rolling, like, really? You chose to throw that in this movie? The first hour had not pushed this envelope, had not made you think any of this stuff was going to happen, but we're going to triple down here in the last hour and really force you guys to pay attention to the climate of today's racial injustice and all that kind of stuff. And guys, this is a kids movie. This is a kids movie. It's not for the adults who liked, Cheaper by the Dozen in the early 2000s. And this is not that kind of movie that after the film you want to sit your kids down and go, here's what they meant by this, because the kids aren't going to pay attention to that, and the kids aren't going to watch that. And like I said, not to mention, there are other films out there and TV shows that do this way better, way more tightly of a story around it, and actually make you want to answer those questions or ask those questions and feel like this was the primary goal to get you to open up discussions about these certain things. Cheaper by the Dozen, it really is lazy and ineffective and basically something that just feels tacked on because they needed to push the runtime a little longer. And because of that, it is a jumbled mess that just keeps sinking as the rest of the movie goes on. It's overly corny, and in the first hour, that overly corniness is kind of a charm to the film. But when you add all this extra crap onto it, the corniness really just starts to go, that the tone is all over the place, and you really just don't know what kind of movie you're watching. Are you trying to watch a fun family comedy remake of a other family comedy film that was really better, but not by that much? Or are you really trying to watch a very social of the times with the way racial inequality is working today? You can't have it both ways, guys. You can't. And if you can, you got to write the script better, and you got to have better actors and actresses do it better. Cheaper by the Dozen fails in all aspects. Zach Braff's character, he's basically trying to do his character JD from Scrubs without the flashbacking of his own brain. He still monologues through this movie, which was unnecessary, unneeded. The only good thing about Cheaper by the Dozen is at the very end, it does one of those old school, let's show you what happens down the road with these characters, because that means we know we're not going to get a sequel to this movie. It's not as bad as Home Sweet Home Alone that Disney Plus came out with on last year, but it's definitely not something I'd recommend. It's not something you should go out and check out. This is definitely one of the worst films of the year so far. So I'm going to give Cheaper by the Dozen a 34%. Going to our final film, this is our Oscar favorite. The Oscars come out this Sunday, and this is definitely one of those movies that's been gaining a ton of steam, and that is Coda. This is a film that I didn't really know much about it. I had heard the name, but I didn't really know what the movie was really about until probably the SAG Awards happened about, I think it was last month. And they all started winning these awards. And that's when I really realized what this movie was. I didn't realize it was on Apple TV until earlier this week. And it's one of those movies that I felt like I needed to check out and see before the Oscars happened. Coda, which stands for Child of Deaf Adults, is basically about the main character, Ruby, who is the daughter of an all-deaf family. She's the only hearing person of them. When the family's fishing business is threatened, Ruby finds herself torn between pursuing her love of music by wanting to go to Berklee College of Music or her fear of abandoning her parents. You got Marlee Matlin, who plays the mother, Jackie, which, I mean, when in terms of thinking of deaf actresses, Marlee Matlin is probably one of the top tier ones out there. You also got Troy Kotsur, who plays Frank the father. You also got Daniel Durant, who plays Leo, the older brother. And then you got Amelia Jones, who plays Ruby, the actual non-deaf, I keep saying deaf, the non-deaf member of the family. Other casts, you got Ferdia Walsh-Pilo, who plays Miles. Many people know him from Sing Street. He was definitely a welcome surprise when I saw him pop on screen. You got Amy Forsyth, who plays Gertie, who's Ruby's best friend. And then you also got Ingino Derbisi. Probably said that wrong, and I apologize. He plays Bernardo Villalobos, who is Ruby's music teacher. This is a movie I went in not expecting to like it, but expecting to watch an Oscar film. You got the obviously that story trope of a kid who is stuck having to be basically the only outlet for her deaf family to contact to the outside world, because not a lot of people know sign language, and especially when they're working a job as fishermen and they're out on a boat and they can't hear anything, or when they bring the fish in, they have to trade the fish. There's got to be someone there who can kind of communicate with the other fishermen and the tradespeople for the fish and stuff like that. And Ruby has to do all this for her family. From a young age, Ruby doesn't get treated like a kid. She gets treated as as basically a translator for her family, which puts an enormous amount of pressure on her, and it really keeps her from actually getting to be able to act like a kid. Now, she's a senior in this film in high school, so she's kind of dealt with this and kind of just accepted this as her life path throughout this film. But when she starts to kind of really go for it in terms of her music, she joins the chorus in her school, and her teacher actually takes notice of her beautiful voice. She starts to learn that she doesn't want to just be this translator for her deaf family, that she actually wants to grow and dream and do something that she loves doing, which is singing. And that's where the real crux of this film comes down to, is because she doesn't want to abandon her family, but she also still wants to be able to live her life. Emilia Jones is amazing in this film. If there was one thing that I was so happy that I ended up checking out this film, was to see her performance as Ruby. I think Emilia Jones, who, like I said, I didn't really know much from outside of this movie, I think she comes in and she does a phenomenal job of showing this weighted pressure and this emotional kind of drain of her body, of dealing with having to help and deal with her family's issues, and then wanting to strive to do something else, and have also I think Eugenio Derbisi as that teacher, to push her and to make her basically kind of go, hey, you can be this little mouse, and you can be this shy person who just kind of accepts the life the way it is, or you can go out and strive and try to be what you actually should be, which is a singer. You have these two kind of cruxes in her life, and her trying to balance this out. And I think Emilia Jones does a phenomenal job. I'm shocked she didn't get a Best Actress nomination for this from the Oscars. She puts on a phenomenal performance. Troy Kotsur as Frank, her father, also puts on a phenomenal performance. He actually is nominated for Best Supporting Actor for the Oscars, and he actually won during the SAG Awards as well. His performance is amazing as well. He's funny. He's passionate. There are some moments in this film that are actually emotional and cry-inducing that is between Frank and Ruby. A lot of it is Frank, because he can see his daughter. He can see that she wants to do more, but he's also has so much pressure because he is a deaf fisherman. He knows that he's being kind of swindled on a lot of his fish, and the money is tight in certain situations like that. Marlee Matlin's Jackie, she really kind of plays, I wouldn't say an overbearing mother, but she's definitely a mother that knows she needs to keep Ruby home in order for them to survive with the fishing and stuff like that. So she's not necessarily playing a mean mother by any means, but she's a mother who is terrified of what could happen if Ruby does leave and go off and find other things. She feels like she's going to be a bad mother if she doesn't keep her close. And Daniel Durant as Leo plays a great job of being this other kid who is, deaf like his parents, but he feels like Ruby, because she can interact with, non-deaf people and kind of has to be this bridge between their family and the real world, that he's just kind of the other child, and he's just kind of pushed to the side. And every time he tries to step up and try to be the savior of the family, both parents kind of go, no, shut up. Ruby's here. Ruby's the one that can do this, which he's trying to push Ruby out let her go and be her own life, because he wants to take over and be the source of the family's help, and kind of do better for the family as well as himself. This film's characters are beautifully written. They're beautifully performed by everyone here. The story that they're telling in this movie is incredibly well done. You love these characters. You breathe these characters. You feel their pain. You feel their anger, especially Ruby in a lot of scenes. She has so much passion and emotion in so many of her scenes, because you can feel the anger, the frustration, the pain, the sadness, and Emilia Jones does a phenomenal job throughout this film. Troy Kotsur, especially towards the latter half of the film, you can see this father who doesn't want to let his daughter go, but is noticing everyone else around him, seeing that his daughter has a future elsewhere, and not being able to see or not being able to hear her, and the one thing that she's supposed to be phenomenal at, and not being able to hear her do those things also weighs heavily on him, and he acts that beautifully. I loved this film. This is definitely one of the best films of 2021. Had we gone back and done our best of list, this would probably have been in easily my top 3. Strong recommendation for Coda. If you guys have Apple TV, go out of your way to check out Coda before the Oscars come this Sunday, or after the Oscars come out this Sunday, and you want to know what is this movie Coda, definitely check this film out. You would not be disappointed. I gave Coda a 96% rating, strong recommendation, phenomenal performances through everyone, and a great story throughout. I cannot wait to see what Emilia Jones does the rest of the way, as well as Troy Kotsur, Daniel Durant, and Marlee Matlin. I hope you guys enjoyed all these reviews. Like I said, I'm doing more and more of these kind of all together, just because so many movies are coming out on streaming and theaters in an individual week that I just don't have enough time to shoot all these videos separately or edit all these videos separately. So I'm kind of just doing a review roundup of everything. Next week, I believe we only got The Lost City, or this upcoming week, we only got The Lost City with Sandra Bullock. So we'll just have that review as on its own. We won't have a review roundup for that. But expect more of these to come out throughout the rest of the year when we get a lot of films all dropped off at the same time. Like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you guys did, go ahead and hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel so you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos pop up on the Movie Crusaders. And of course, you have to follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. On top of the Lost City review, we will also have the Movie Crusaders Oscar show, where Brian Michaels and myself will be going over our predictions for all the Oscar categories, as well as telling you who we thought should have been nominated for these films and who we would have picked for winners for these films for our actual nominations, plus picking the winners for this Oscars as well. We also did our Movie Crusaders Award show 2 weeks ago, where we went over genres and special fun categories for movies that came out in 2021. We picked our winners for that. And then we also had this past weekend our actor, actress, director showcase, where we talked about Bruce Willis, Sandra Bullock, and Edgar Wright. So check out all those videos, and yeah, go watch Coda. Out of all these movies, go watch X, go watch Coda, enjoy them. Until next time, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.